Okay, hi. We have Kathy Schwalbe. Kathy is a PhD PMP. She's a professor at Osberg College in Minnesota. She earned her PhD at the University of Minnesota, her MBA at Northeastern University, and her BS in mathematics at the University of Notre Dame, while on an Air Force era ROTC scholarship. Kathy's first job as a project management officer in the U.S. Air Force. She also worked on projects at Boeing, Clark Oil, and several other organizations. Kathy was named Educator of the Year in 2011 by the Association of IT Professionals. She is the author of several books, including An Introduction to Project Management, Healthcare Project Management, and Information Technology Project Management. Kathy, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. It's always a pleasure.
So, Kathy, today's topic is on leadership in project management. So, basically, our conversation revolved around leadership and the human elements of project management, which is pretty much very important, I think.
Very much so. Yeah.
Kathy, first maybe I'd like to have a chat about women in leadership. How can we empower women to take up more leadership roles in project management and other kind of leader roles in organizations?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question. I think it does start early on, in childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Even with my own children, I have a daughter and two sons, and if I would see any of them being passive when I think they, should stand up and do something, I'd encourage them to do that. The same thing in school, the teachers have to encourage the boys and the girls, and there's actually been a lot of research on that. Teachers tend to favor the boys instead of the girls, so there's a lot that parents can do, teachers can do, but then, at a certain point, and most of your viewers are college students or working adults, I mean, it comes at a certain point, even when you're a teenager, you really can do a lot for yourself. So once you get that internal motivation, you can take a lot of steps to start developing your own leadership skills. So, I mean, it's not an easy thing, Ideally, your parents would help you, your teachers, but if they didn't, it's not too late for someone to change themselves and take on more leadership roles.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think it is important to have that balance. When you have only males being in the environment and having leadership roles, there's a tendency to be a kind of... it actually comes down to emotional intelligence. I feel women have more higher emotional intelligence than men. I'm not sure if that's the case. But speaking of emotional intelligence, Kathy, what do you think about emotional intelligence and how is it important in leadership and in project environment?
Well, and I think everyone knows people that are super smart but book smart, but you get them even in a conversation, they can't carry on a conversation. You put them on a team, they can't work with the team. So, I mean, you have to look at all different sides of intelligence. I did want to back up a second. You made me realize when you were talking about the lack of women leaders, especially in IT. I think most of your students are in technology roles, but when I was in college, I met my husband there, but he was taking an anthropology course. And I mean, it's still known to this day that there aren't many women in math and science. So he decided to interview several women who were math and science majors, myself included, to find out why we decided to go into that field. And I didn't realize until he asked me all these questions that a lot of it, and I actually prefer working with men. So it didn't bother me that I didn't have a lot of women in leadership, because my style, my interests, and I realized that several of my teachers in grade school and high school, the math and science teachers were often the only men, and they encouraged competition, so it was always the girls against the boys, and I always wanted to beat the boys, so I gravitated towards working in science and technology, also because there's more money in it, I'll be honest. I knew I'd make more money if I went into science technology than if I was, now I am an educator, but, not a K-12 teacher or some other field. So, I mean, I think some women just do well because they're interested in that area. The ideas, they don't see the gender issue. I mean, yes, I would see it because I'd often be the only woman. When I started in the Air Force, I was only the second female officer out of 100 officers in my unit. So yes, you notice, but it never bothered me all that much, I guess, because most of the men I worked with were very supportive. And I know he told me early on, he said the main thing women can do to move up in leadership is just to stay working and, just stay active, because too many women drop out.
Right.
Yes, I have children, but I always worked with the children. And I think it made me a better worker, because I remember when I started Boeing, so I had 2 young children then, so our youngest was 3 months. I took off 3 months after I had him before I went back to work. But I mean, to me, I wanted to make sure I was doing something very useful when I went to work, because I could have been at home nurturing my children. So I think a lot of working moms are even more productive because, they want to make use of their time.
So you find more balancing by working and also taking care of the kids.
Well, and I think the big thing with the balance, and there's a lot of books and articles, but you definitely have to have a good support system. So, I mean, my husband was always extremely supportive. He was a professor, so he had a lot of flexibility in his job when our kids were younger. Now he's no longer a professor. We've kind of changed roles, but he works at home. But he knew more about raising kids than I did. He was the oldest of 8 children. I was a middle child, and I hated kids when I was younger. I hated babysitting. I hated watching my younger siblings. My parents, even questioned if I'd ever want to be a mom, but then they met my husband, and they're like, well, if she marries him, then she'll probably have a few kids because he'd be such a great dad. So I think you need to have a very supportive spouse or significant other, or at least a strong network. You can't just abandon your children. But I also see it as being a role model. If your children see that, yes, mom can work and mom can make decisions, and, even now, my daughter's 30, my 2 sons are in their 20s, they'll still ask me all the business advice and career advice and tax advice because they know their dad isn't interested in that kind of stuff.
Fantastic. And so I guess the environment is very important in terms of growing leaders, female leaders and male leaders. So the environment kind of, if you have a supportive environment, a supportive network, then that really helps.
Right, and the network doesn't have to be all women. I mean, yes, it's nice when you find other women, but I've had some very great mentors who were men. I would say all of my great mentors were men, not women, because I guess there are so few out there. But I do mentor several people now, some former students and colleagues, and so I know some of them, especially one woman in particular. She always says that I'm her favorite student, and she probably is one of my favorite students, but she's at a very high level right now. But I remember when I first had her as a student, she did not have self-confidence at all. So I think that's a key issue, and I see the lack of self-confidence more in women than in men. So I just tried to help her build up her confidence, and she would get bullied a bit by men, but she was also short, petite. I'm a pretty tall, strong person. I don't know if that makes any difference, but I think it's how you carry yourself and how confident you are will make a big difference, if you can lead people, because they don't want to follow someone who doesn't seem confident themselves.
Exactly. So the issue is from the self. If women are more confident in their abilities, environment is already there. There's a supportive environment. It's just a matter of having more confidence and believing in oneself, basically.
Right, definitely.
Right. And also, you're interested in emotional intelligence. How important is emotional intelligence in a leadership or project management environment?
Well, and very much so. And I think I mentioned to you one class I taught a while ago. I had students read the book Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, and that one was okay. I actually preferred, he had another one called Working with Emotional Intelligence.
Yes, that's more practical. Yes.
Yeah, I think that was a lot more interesting. But, in most jobs with a big project, a big team, it's all about dealing with the different people. So you have to be able to pick up on, what people are feeling, if you can believe them or not, when someone can do a job or they need some help, because a lot of people are not willing to ask for help. They won't admit that they can't do something, and often it's too late. You find out they didn't deliver it. So just being able to pick up on what's happening. So a lot of that, I view that as emotional intelligence, and being able to read people and, politely tell them when they need some help doing something, or, just to figure out who needs help or not, how to deal with others. So, yeah, that, can be learned, but that's, like you said, I think women often have a more natural ability to communicate and to pick up on the body language and what's going on. But again, they have to have the confidence and the skills to know how to react to that.
Right. So that's kind of, it looks where men are lacking the, understanding emotions more effectively, but they have the confidence to approach, whereas women have the emotional intelligence, but then not having the confidence to approach and then say, if is there something wrong, or if is there something you need help with. So it's kind of, I guess from both sides we need to develop those skills of from the male side is developing the emotional intelligence skills to read people's emotions and develop empathy, and women having more confidence to actually approach and deal with situations where they feel something may not be right. Is that kind of what,
right? Right.
Fantastic.
I think we're kind of figuring that out together. So.
No, it's definitely. So we can see where we're falling short, and then kind of developing those particular skills to be more effective. I have a few questions from students, so I'll read them out for you if that's okay. So the first one is from Bobby, and he says there is a great deal written, research, studied about leadership. What are your thoughts on followership? So, in other words, no matter how good the leader, an employee can make it difficult for even the best leader to lead if they don't want to be led.
Right.
What are your...
I think that was a great question. I actually did Google followership.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't heard that term as much. I've heard about servant leadership. I think is related. But the two dimensions of followership are how developed someone's critical thinking abilities are, and then the other one is if they're active or passive. So I think on most big projects, especially in a corporation or even a small business involving technology, I would think most people have pretty good critical thinking skills, or they wouldn't have been hired. If not, yes, you can say with today's economy, time to get rid of those people. You want to make sure you've got people that have good critical thinking skills. But so then it's a matter of getting them more actively involved in your project than being passive. And I think, in my organization now, we do have a big issue with, a lot of smart college professors are very passive with a lot of the changes and the things going on, and so we're alienated followers, and I can see that it is causing a lot of problems in our organization. People have the skills, they know what they're doing, but they've seen too many change initiatives, or people saying they're going to do something and it doesn't happen, so that makes you very passive in the organization. So I don't know, the answer to get them to be more active, I guess, is to get them involved in the change initiatives in the first place, instead of just saying, here's what we're going to do, now you have to follow us. Ask people, well, what do you think needs to be done, and find something that they're more passionate about, and they're going to be more willing to work on it. And also, show, and that's where I think my bias with starting in project managers are used to having a goal and getting things done and moving on, but in a lot of companies, that's not how things work. There's a lot of politics, and they're not as interested in achievement. It's more, I don't know, the people that are power hungry. I guess that's what I see. So, and that's where, again, in a project environment, I think you do have a better situation, because you should be focused on achieving the goal and moving on. You know, and even if you don't like the people or the politics on that project, it's going to end, and then you can move elsewhere into hopefully a better environment.
And that kind of really nicely follows on to the next question, which is open communication. Now, this second question is from Bobby as well, and he says, I agree that open communication builds trust in a team and has several other benefits as well. However, I have also found that open communication can create a safe forum and empower that one person who thinks they should be the project manager to show you all the reasons why you shouldn't be the project manager. So it's kind of, I think the question is, if you empower people and ask them what is the best thing to do, will there be people who misuse that power and try to kind of formulate a coup against a project manager, for instance? Does that happen, or how likely is that to happen? And yeah, so what are your thoughts about that kind of?
And I have seen coups against project managers, and sometimes it's good, if it's not a good project manager.
Right, yeah.
And, someone else should be involved. But that's where hopefully there is someone else in the organization that people can go to, that can kind of be more objective and figure out the situation. And if it means they need a new project manager, then there should be a new project manager. But yeah, you don't want people behind the project manager's back talking about things and not focusing on getting their work done. So I guess the main thing is to make sure everyone knows what they're supposed to do, how it fits into the whole, and focus on that.
So it's kind of that open communication allows kind of transparency and if obviously the project manager is not the right person, then that comes out and a new one is actually selected or elected as a new project manager.
And then also with the open communications, and I remember when I wrote my first edition of the IT project management book, I addressed conflict, but I was pretty negative on, in saying that you really want to minimize conflict. But I had one professor, someone said, well, I disagree, because often you do want to have conflict, but you want conflict related to the work. Because often you find a better way to do things. So it's fine if team members disagree and they say, well, this is how we should do the work, as long as the project manager, is open on his or her end and can say, well, if it's better, then by all means do it. But you don't want conflict with personalities. Well, I don't like so-and-so. That you want to get rid of that right away and just don't even tolerate it.
Exactly. So avoiding personal attacks and kind of having personal agendas on the table rather than focusing on the work. And if someone feels that, there's a better way to do it, obviously there will be a bit of conflict, but then out of that conflict, a better way is formulated rather than and there's a lot of cultural factors involved in this. Now, a lot of the Asian cultures probably, when the leader has a way of doing things, and followers might feel, oh no, that's probably not the most efficient way, but they're not willing to speak out because they don't want to create any tension or conflict. So it's kind of a cultural factor playing a role here as well. Now, in that regard, and I've seen a bell curve shape with conflict. If there's no conflict, the organization becomes stale and non-innovative. Whereas if there's too much conflict, again, there'll be a lot of tension, there'll be a lot of stress, and again, the organization becomes dysfunctional in a lot of ways. So how can we find that balance? Or is there a way to find a balance? Or is it just kind of more like a trial and error process to find that fine balance?
Good question. I hope the answer is not that it's just all trial and error. That'd be too much work. And that's where, you hear about the high performance teams. So once you do get people working together, try to keep them together. So, that's one thing you can do. I know there are all types of reviews that are really popular. I don't know if you have those 360-degree reviews,
Mm-hmm.
Ways to get inputs
Exactly.
from different people. So I think that's helpful. And actually, an example I was thinking of, in my older son's name is Bobby, so since your student Bobby has several questions. But he asked me a couple of years ago, he had been working at this company for like 3 years, and they were doing a 360 review, and he really did not like his immediate superior, who was like the technical project lead. My son was a senior programmer or whatever, but they did not get along whatsoever. I mean, just really bad environment. So I asked him for more details, and there was a very personal issue because this guy was from a different country, and he wasn't sure he could stay in the United States. So he actually asked my son's girlfriend if she would marry him so he could stay in the country. And my son's girlfriend, and they weren't boyfriend-girlfriend at the time, she just worked there. But she's like, no way, she didn't really know this guy, she didn't like this guy. She's like, no, I'm not going to marry you, so you can stay in the country. And then my son started working there and started dating her, so she finally told him what had happened. So there was kind of that underlying conflict right there. But also this guy, he kind of took advantage of my son because he would obviously make some design errors that he wouldn't test. He wouldn't test his code before he'd send it to my son to do something. So it's like my son was doing the extra testing and work for him, so it was just slowing things down, and couldn't get things done, and he wasn't following the process. The company had a good process on how they would develop the code. So my son asked, so what should I do with this review? I'm supposed to give feedback on these different people. Should I just say, well, yeah, everybody's perfect and give them the highest score? Or should I be honest? And I said, well, if you have that strong a conflict with this guy that you have to work closely with, I said, you definitely need to bring that up. But don't focus on the personality conflicts. Focus on the work. So document, what is he doing that is hurting the business? So he did. And I remember he called me a couple weeks later, and I thought, oh no, I hope he didn't get fired, because I told him to be honest with this review. But actually the senior management decided to separate them and put them on different projects, and then my son was so much happier because he got on a different group and didn't, have that stifling his work. So often, I mean, you can't work in an environment when there's too much conflict. And in that case, it was personal and work-related conflict. So that's the worst of everything.
Exactly. And I mean, I think it's really important to give that honest feedback, because if we don't give that honest feedback, nothing changes. And as you said, it's just it's not attacking the person directly. It's just the work, and obviously we had a positive result coming out of that. So in terms of leadership skills, what leadership skills can project managers more effectively work on, or is there specific leadership skills that bring out the best results out of teams and projects?
Yeah, and there, I guess, within a team, it is more making the connection with the different team players, trying to use their strengths, put them on parts of the projects, they'll enjoy more and use their strengths. But then often more important is the leadership outside of your project team. So to make sure senior management people all the way up the organization think a project is worthwhile and you deserve the resources. So that's often harder, I think, for a lot of people to develop. So you have to be good at presenting, you have to be good at speaking, you have to be pretty forceful, or sound more commanding. I know I took a seminar a long time ago because I would have voice issues, and I don't know how I sound now, but I never liked my voice, and felt it wasn't that strong. So I actually took some classes, and it really helped, just to project your voice more and sound a little bit more in command. And I see that often with women too, that they don't project themselves, they don't sound convincing. So you need to definitely sound convincing to people outside your project team.
It's almost like pitching skills, isn't it? Like, being able to pitch
Yep.
your ideas that this
I didn't
is...
want to say that, and I could never be a salesperson, but I know salespeople are important, but you really do to, get your project noticed, you have to be a good salesperson. So yeah, definitely giving a really good presentation that people remember, shaking hands, just being more personable when maybe that's not your inclination and that's not how your team operates. So you have to be flexible and do what fits in best in the situation.
And it is, and a few of my other students have asked questions around how do we compete against other project managers working on different projects and, fighting for resources. So it is about selling your idea and showing that, no, this idea is actually much more important for the organization, or this project, for the it's much more important, and being able to sell that, isn't it? Kind of it, because at the end of the day, everyone's fighting for all these limited resources.
Right. Or you convince senior management that we can't do all 10 projects with the resources. Let's cut it down to the top 5. Let's work together and get those done well, and then we'll tackle something else.
So is it suitable for a project manager to not be so attached to their project and kind of when speaking with when speaking
I've gotten off of some projects because I could see that they weren't as important as some other projects, and it's usually, you figure that out pretty quickly. So I hate to say that's been always my approach, is to try to bail. If you can't convince them to cancel the project or put it off, then you got to move on.
Exactly. And is it worth trusting the upper management that they know what is best, what project is the best one for the organization? So now there's a level of kind of, if I have an idea and I want to sell it to the upper management, how can I present in a way that I don't feel that they're pressured to support my project, but at the same time I'm trusting that they know what is best for the organization? So kind of bringing that balance together.
Well, that's where, the whole concept of portfolio management, so you have to assume that there are people high up in the organization that know more than the majority of project managers. I give an example to my students. When I was at Boeing, I was working on a system, and again, this is pre-internet, pre-World Wide Web, where everybody had their resume on all these job search engines. But it was a real exciting project. I did have some funding and some resources, and everything was going great, but then it just got cut, and no explanation. I remember I was really upset, and, would try to convince my boss, but he'd, go up and say, no, it's cut. But then 6 months later, the company started laying off a bunch of people. So they knew that they weren't going to win some big contract, and they weren't going to need to hire all these people, so they didn't need this project I was working on, and I guess they just weren't ready to make that information public. So often, the higher-ups have information that the project managers don't. So it's hard to say when you know that for sure, but again, that's where you do have to trust the senior leaders in your company to know that they're assigning and picking the right projects to work on.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Kathy, and I'll make this interview available to the students. I'm teaching two classes this year on leadership, so I'm sure they will find it of great value. So I thank you again for your time today.
All right, you're welcome. Hope to come to Australia sometime.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Please, it would be great to have you here, and it would be great to visit our university here at Sydney as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kathy. Bye-bye.